If you didn't know, this is one of the most slept on sets in EpicSeven, and this isn't just some clickbait meme trying to get you to build Protection Eaton or Assassin Cartusia. Here are some important things to remember before we get into it. This set of gear is not real, and while one of these sets doesn't give you stats, it is good for preventing characters like Flan from defense breaking you, Command Model Leica sleeping you with her skill 3, Pirate Captain Flan from landing bombs on her skill 3, Senya from provoking you. You get the gist. The other set is the best way to do damage in PvE, assuming your debuffs land. But let's get the elephant out of the room. If you're trying to build a character with immunity set and you're trying to hit a certain threshold of effect resistance or health, and this is holding you back because you don't have something like HP set, defense set, or resist set, it will feel really bad. That being said though, if you have 200 effect resistance and immunity on your characters, your opponent's gonna be really mad. Similar to counter set, immunity is one of those sets that you kind of feel like every character in the game can use at some point, so it will feel like you'll have to keep rolling for any kind of immunity gear and just pray that it rolls high. But Rage set is for PvE what Destruction set is for Bruisers or for characters that really want to cheat out on stats. In other words, the 30% increase in damage when you're hitting a debuffed character, that's pretty much incomparable across the board. Now, just as a PSA or reminder, since I already went over this in my last gear guiding videos, and especially in the most recent Banshee rolling video, now I am going to talk about the rolls or the base rolls and substat combinations that you'll need, just as a quick reminder since I've already talked about it on other videos before this. But as always, make sure to keep in mind who you're rolling for or what kind of gear you're looking for when you're rolling, just so that you don't forget anything or you're not rolling over gear that could otherwise be used for a character in the future that you may end up building. So for this specific rage set that we have right now, you would obviously use this on a damage dealer, and damage dealers want crit chance, crit damage, but on chest, especially for rage set, you might not need speed and you might actually end up wanting effect resistance. Now for bruisers, of course, you still want the crit chance and crit damage on occasion. However, you definitely want to put more of an emphasis on HP and defense, and this changes because bruiser is kind of subjective and you have bruisers like Senya who are not really quite the same as bruisers like Bellion. However, when it comes to immunity, just keep in mind that there are a decent amount of bruisers that would rather have penetration set, which is a video that I'll create in the future, or I'll make a video on that in the future. So therefore, having immunity on these characters might not be the best. Now for bruisers, you do typically want crit chance neck just because some of these characters need so much stat and there's no way to have a good character built without having crit chance on their neck. However, what they're usually looking for is crit chance, crit damage, HP, defense, and speed. That being said though, there are a decent number of bruisers, characters like Shu or Apoc Ravi, Alencia, Ed, that may not actually want immunity, and it would be better for them to run pen. So keep that in mind when you're trying to decide whether the piece of gear that you're rolling for is actually worth rolling for. For soul weavers or defensive knights, you generally are looking for stuff like HP, effect resistance, and speed. But something that's kind of an unspoken rule in the EpicSeven community is that when it comes to specifically soul weavers, you can sometimes skip out on stats, and that paired with the fact that it's immunity set, which I'll get to in the next section, kind of makes it so that stats like flat defense or flat HP is generally acceptable so long as you're not griefing the stats too hard and you're achieving some sort of tankiness or some sort of acceptable stat line when it comes to your soul weavers. Knights are pretty much the same, and there isn't that much difference between like a 195 and a 200 or a 190 and a 200 knight. So don't stress out too much if you have something that just has a bit more flat rolls, but keep in mind that you don't want to have a really bad set of gear on your characters. Once again, for sets that don't actually give you additional stat, like with immunity set, the equipment score needs to be decently high, so again in that 28 to 30 range. And of course for statted gear, or for rage set in this case, you can look for something like 27 to 28 equipment score at the bare minimum. However, there is a big difference between rolling for Azamanak and for Banshee and Wyvern. Originally, I mentioned the two different kind of equipment score breakpoints that you're looking for when it comes to gear like this, or for statted sets or for non-statted sets. But given how rare it is to farm Azamanak and how infrequent you're going to just be committing to Azamanak as opposed to Wyvern or Banshee, the equipment score that you can deem acceptable is actually much lower than any other hunt. This is especially true when it comes to your boots, your necks, and your rings. And generally speaking, you just need the rolls to land in the correct substats, i.e. crit chance, crit damage, attack. And as so long as you don't overcap on something like crit chance or crit damage or get too fast on your characters, you'll be fine. Immunity is different than the other sets for its own set of reasons, and it's primarily because of the endless war of effect resistance versus effectiveness, and it just never ends. The immunity icon, or the muscle icon as we like to call it, is sometimes all you need to deter certain characters or players even from choosing to debuff you. With this in mind, with tanks and soul weavers, sometimes the illusion of high gear score or just having the immunity icon itself is enough to prevent people from wanting to attack you or even deal with certain units. Therefore, in some cases, you can give up equipment score in the name of just completing the set. For rage set, you don't even really need 100 or heck even 95 equipment score to deem a piece noteworthy or usable, just because the content that you're trying to beat up with this gear is usually not going to need anything above 90, 85, etc. So therefore, with both of these sets, as long as it achieves your goal or it clears the content that you're looking for, go ahead, use it. Now, the final difference between Asthmatic rolling and Banshee rolling is ultimately what you're willing to roll. And so again, for epic pieces of gear, you can roll the piece of gear to +6, and ultimately you can see if it meets your requirements or your standards, and then you could decide ultimately if you want to speed check some pieces of gear like that as well. But again, just a speed checking PSA. Similar to Banshee, you probably will lose your mind if you're trying to upgrade pieces of gear that will end up being used as broken sets if you have too many of them. But even then, you'll likely only end up speed checking immunity gear just because of how rare both of these sets are and how unlikely it is for either of these sets to roll really high on the off chance that you even have a set of these. But the final section that I want to talk about before we get into some gear rolling examples are the purple pieces or the heroic gear. This is pretty much exclusively locked once again to rolling for speed checks or perfectly rolled gear. But again, unlike other sets in EpicSeven, you can kind of invest in like a baby's first set of gear in this case. And if you really need a set of purple gear in order to make something work, or if you really just need immunity on this knight or this soul weaver so that you don't get defense broken by Flan, or like you have a Pirate Captain Flan that S3s you, you are more than welcome to just upgrade a set of gear, especially if it's just a burner or, you know, your first rookie set of gear. I promise you it will not matter in the long run. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of give you the rundown of what I'm going to roll and see what my thought process is and see whether or not it's worth rolling. Okay, so now I know what you're thinking when it comes to this piece of gear. Connor, there's a low roll of effectiveness, it's almost a low roll of critical hit damage, and there's flat attack. This can't be usable. However, I want to remind you guys that depending on how little gear you have, or depending on how rare a piece like this is on the account, or whether or not the person has any immunity gear whatsoever, will ultimately determine whether you consider this rollable. It is 26 equipment score, which is not the worst in the world, and it is kind of close to the 28 to 30-ish threshold that we're talking about. However, it is a low roll of effectiveness, and I'm not really sure what you would end up doing with the low roll of effectiveness on an immunity set anyways. That being said though, if we dodge the effectiveness and the attack and we can get critical hit chance or critical hit damage, ultimately if it's a pent roll even, I'll take it. Okay, so it's a red piece of gear. I'm gonna level it to +6. Well, obviously it rolled into exactly what I didn't want. It was a decently high effectiveness roll, and I think 40 is on the higher end in terms of rolls on flats, because I think like the highest roll you can get is like 44 or something on flat attack. However, it's not really worth it to continue on this sort of piece because there isn't really a home for it. I don't think it's really worth it to invest a mod gem on this in case if you ended up wanting to commit to the piece. We're going to sell it for charms. The other piece of gear that we had that I'm trying to find right now, I believe was that rage set chest, and this one looks almost infallible. Because even if you end up getting all into effect resistance, we have the mod gem right here for, you know, effectiveness. And ultimately, it has 7 critical hit damage. It has 4 crit chance. It has 4 speed. Either this rolls 29 speed or it rolls 40 effect resistance and it ends up being for someone else, or we end up having to mod it out or something. Not mod out the speed, by the way, but mod out the effect resistance. Or it ends up rolling into critical hit chance and critical hit damage. And I would probably end up using this piece any day of the week. I'm kind of jealous of this because I really want a piece like this and I just don't have it. You know the rules, +6. Okay, well, obviously it doesn't really look like a piece for... Okay, so now we're kind of in between two things. There are some fights where you do want someone like Rem or Strays to not get outsped, and therefore you do need a rage piece of gear that has some speed on it. But generally speaking, it would have been nice if we just all committed into speed and it was like a speed piece, or if we all committed into crit chance and crit damage and it was just a DPS piece. However, we have 2 more rolls to go. Hopefully, I mean, ideally, I'm sure that the person whose account I'm working on wants a 22 speed, but it would also be nice to, you know, get max rolls into critical hit damage or critical hit chance too. Wow. Happy for you, but obviously it would, and like you guys are probably feeling the pain of this too. Like, yes, okay, like it's nice, you're getting the rage, but like imagine if this was on speed set. Imagine if this was on immunity set. Imagine if this was on resist set. Imagine if it was on crit set, a pen set, torrent set, anything, right? It just feels a little bit worse. Don't complain though, obviously. Don't complain. Smilegate is listening, okay? Smilegate is listening. Thank you, Smilegate. Thank you so much. I love you. And finally, for the final touch. Psych! Well, it is a really weird piece. I think this reforges. Okay, well, obviously it would have been nice if we had some other stats in there, but we got a 13 crit damage, 11 crit chance, 17 speed chest. If this is a beginner account, he could definitely use this on a character like Rand if this is just his fastest piece. And it's 85 equipment score before the reforge, which means that this should end up, I believe, let me just reforge this real quick. By the way, Smilegate, you should, to be clear, you should definitely just change this whole like not showing the equipment score thing beforehand. That is extremely annoying. But as you can see, if we change the effect resistance roll here to effectiveness, this is a 101 equipment score piece that unfortunately, if you're trying to like justify being on a DPS character, loses a little bit of stat just because you're not going to run like a speed rage set character. And ultimately, if this were on speed set or another set, it would feel a little bit better. But of course, I'm sure he's not going to complain about rolling a 100 equipment score piece. You're welcome, random fan. By the way, guys, just as a quick aside, if you want to join the Discord to have your account potentially featured for the KDs or for other guides, features, etc., make sure to join the Discord. It's probably in the description. But of course, guys, like I said, this piece is pretty good. You don't really have to worry about it too much. Again, it might not be quite fast enough for some people. Again, I say some people, but I'm sure for like a majority of players, if you're looking at 17 speed and you have like the critical hit chance, critical hit damage, you can definitely use this on a character like Sid, Ran, Assassin Sid, etc., etc. However, like I mentioned, guys, with these specific 3 stats, you can use this on plenty of DPSs, especially if you want them to be faster. However, if it rolled all into critical hit damage or critical hit chance, you could definitely have argued even using this or any piece that you roll as a broken set for a DPS as well, for a wyvern or for some hunt. But that's going to be the end of this video, guys. I hope this guy is happy with the piece that I rolled for him. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. That's going to be it for this video, though. Make sure to like, comment, turn the notification bell, and subscribe. I will see you guys on the next one. Adios.